getting there. Yeah, everybody else should be.
Okay, so maybe just Bob.
Jessica, you got to put
Yeah,
some,
Bob confirmed.
you got to sit on it. There you go. Were you trying to hide?
No,
Hello.
I'm in a hotel room, so I'm trying to find my sweet spot here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's 6 o'clock, but I think we're still waiting on Committee Member Talboy, if you just want to give it a minute.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh.
We have a quorum. If you want to go ahead and get started, I can kind of watch my email and make sure he's not having any difficulties getting in.
Sounds good, Josh. Do you want to start your deal? Are you doing the intro still?
Yes, yeah, I'll go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Works for me.
All right, good evening and welcome to the Boise City Design Review Committee meeting. A few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you will be called upon and unmuted. There's a chat function in Zoom. It is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. If the chat function isn't available for you, you can email zoninginfo@cityofboise.org with any technical issues. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team. Then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we'll proceed to public testimony, starting with those who signed up on the online sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Again, that's *9. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes of testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the committee will deliberate and render a decision. Tonight's agenda and proceedings will be almost the same as a regular in-person hearing, except we might have a bit of a delay as we work through the new technology. Please be courteous and patient with us as we venture through this new format. And Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you, Josh. I would like to call the August 12th, 2020 Design Review Committee meeting to order. We are the citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by City Council. We make final decisions on design review permits. Any decision made tonight will be appealed to the Boise City Planning and Zoning Commission, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of the hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order on the agenda with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then public testimony. Thank you all for virtually attending tonight. And at this time, will the clerk please call the roll? Victoria?
Marsh,
Here?
Aguilar,
Here.
Zabala,
Here.
Rudine,
Here.
Cowboy,
Here.
Temple, Zuckerman, 5 present, 2 absent.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we have 7 items to be considered for tonight's consent agenda. The first item to be considered for tonight's consent agenda is item number 1. It's DRH 20-00052. The location is 2919 West Jordan Street. It's to construct a multifamily residential project consisting of 2 4-story buildings containing 8 units with associated site improvements on a property in an R3D zone. Is the applicant present? If so, please notify by virtually raising your hand.
Present.
Thank you. Let the record show the applicant is present. Are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of the staff report?
Yes.
Please let the record show you are in agreement. Is there anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this application? If so, please virtually raise your hand. I don't see any virtually raised hands. Josh, do you?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not.
Seeing no, this item will be moved to the consent agenda. The second item we'll be considering for tonight's consent agenda is item number 3. It's DRH 20-00262. Eric Anderson. Location is 10390 West State Street. It's to construct an approximately 5,100 square foot laundromat building and associated site improvements on a property in a PCD zone. Is the applicant present? If you do, please virtually raise your hand. I see a raised hand, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. Are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of the staff report? And if so, please
Yes.
raise your hands. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, yes, we are.
Is there anyone wishing to testify in opposition to this item? If you would, please raise your hand virtually. Seeing no raised hands, Josh, you see any?
Mr. Chairman, I do not. I believe we had a member of the public sign up before the hearing to testify on this item, but I don't know if they are in attendance right now.
I'll ask this question again. Is there any other member of the public wishing to testify in opposition to this item tonight? Please let me know and virtually raise your hand. No one present there with you, Josh, and I see no hands raised. So this item will be moved to the consent agenda. Next item to be considered on tonight's consent agenda is item number 4. It's DRH 20-00268. Location is 2602 West Canal Street. It's to construct an approximately 3,500 square foot laundromat building and associated site improvements on a site in a C2D zone. And is the applicant present? Please virtually raise your hand. See so. And is the applicant, are you in agreement with the conditions of the staff report?
Yes, we are.
To show they are in agreement. Again, is there anyone in the anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this item? If you would virtually, please raise your hand. See no raised hands. This item will be placed on the consent agenda. The next item to be considered for tonight's consent agenda is item number 5, DRH 20-00296. The location is 1426 Euclid Avenue. It's to construct 4 single-family detached dwellings with alley-loaded garages and 1 accessory dwelling unit on 4 contiguous substandard lots on a property in an R3 zone. Is the applicant present? Please raise your hands. Applicant is present. Is the applicant in agreement with the conditions of the staff report? Please virtually raise your hand.
Yes, we are.
And they are in agreement. Is there anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this item? Please virtually raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, this item will also be placed on the consent agenda tonight. The next item to be considered for the consent agenda is DRH 20-00298. The location is 5452 West State Street. To construct an approximately 16,800 square foot office and warehouse building with associated site improvements on a property in a C3D zone. Is the applicant present? If you would, please virtually raise your hand. We have a raised hand, Mr. Barton. Thank you. And are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of the staff report?
We are.
Thank you. And is there anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this item? Please virtually raise your hand. Looks like we do have one person wanting to testify in opposition. Is that correct? I think that's shown. So we will hear item number 6 tonight. Thank you. Next item to be considered on tonight's consent agenda is item number 7, DRH 20-00300. Location is 858 West McGregor Court. It's for the construction of an approximately 91,000 square foot manufacturing, office, and warehouse building with associated site improvements in a property in an M1B zone. Is the applicant present? Please virtually raise your hand. I see a raised hand. Thank you, Mr. Clark. And are you in agreement with the conditions of the staff report? Please virtually raise your hand. Seeing a raised hand, I'm assuming you're in agreement with the staff report. Is there anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this item? If so, please virtually raise your hand. Seeing none, this item will be moved to the consent agenda. The final item to be heard tonight to be considered tonight on the consent agenda is item number 8, DRH 20-00301. Location is 6099 South Federal Way. It's to construct a self-service storage facility consisting of 16 buildings, totaling approximately 348,000 square feet, and the associated site improvements in an M1D zone. Is the applicant present? If you would, please virtually raise your hand. Thank you, Mr. Hatch. And are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of the staff report?
We are.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone present wishing to testify in opposition to this item? If so, please virtually raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands. I'll place this on the consent agenda, and that concludes our items to be considered for tonight's consent agenda, and I'll bring it back to the committee for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we approve the items on tonight's agenda, items 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 of the consent agenda with the recommended conditions of approval noted in each project report.
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda items? Hearing none. Victoria, please call the roll.
Zabala,
Aye.
Radine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Cowboy.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you very much. So first item before us tonight is item number 2. It's DRH 20-0069. And at this time, we will hear from staff. Staff, can we have the report?
Yes. Can you guys see my screen?
You can.
Perfect. All right, Chairman, committee members, again, we're talking about DRH 20-00069 located at 8306 West State Street. So this project is addressed off of State Street because it was recently connected to the property to the south. There was a minor land division in 2019. And it's currently its own parcel. It will receive a new address, most likely off of Limelight, potentially off of Rose Street as well. So this project is for the development of 85 multifamily units within four buildings, not two. And it was approved through a planned unit development. That PUD was appealed to City Council with some concerns about safety and infrastructure. City Council has heard the appeal. They have generally approved the project to move forward, and they will receive findings shortly. The project also had a rezone from R1A to R3D. These are the proposed elevations. They are using a gable roof, but they're kind of modulated, so it creates a shed roof design. They are proposing fiber cement lap siding, stucco panels, as well as stone veneer. This is the proposed site plan. You can see that the main entry is proposed along Limelight Street. There's a secondary entry along Rose Street as well. Through the PUD process, there were some site conditions. The first is that there needs to be a cross access to the south and west for future redevelopment. So if we go back to the aerial, you can see that the property is surrounded by relatively undeveloped parcels. So in the future, if they develop, there will be cross access to reduce curb cuts in the area. Additionally, all setbacks shall be measured from the final property lines. ACHD is going to take some right-of-way with this project, and the proposed property line should be the final property line, so we shouldn't see any changes of what this site plan shows. The main design review condition for the site plan is that all internal pathways shall be a minimum of 5 feet in width. When we were working through this process, we were kind of spot checking the sidewalks and then doing a full review. We noticed that there's just a couple of pathways that don't quite meet the 5 feet in width, particularly along the southern building. Based off of the site plan, the landscape that's available to be reduced, we don't anticipate any significant changes in order to meet that condition. So again, the plan unit development did receive approval from Planning and Zoning. That hearing was on June 1st. The Northwest Neighborhood Association appealed the project with concerns about infrastructure and safety. The appeal was heard by City Council on July 28th. At that council hearing, there was some discussions, again, primarily on infrastructure and safety. The main discussion that impacts design review is the stormwater swales. So this project is proposing swales between the street and the detached sidewalk. Swales within the street buffer that aren't in an industrial zone require alternative compliance reviewed through design review. City Council directed design review to work on a drainage solution that has minimal slope or mitigation for such slope, as well as greater connectivity. So this is the swale design that was presented before City Council that has the direction to try and reduce slope and create connectivity. As you can see, the swales are located between the street as well as the sidewalk. They are proposing lawn and vegetation, primarily native vegetation, as well as street trees. So the primary concern was the slopes were proposed at approximately 12 inches deep each. There's also not a lot of connectivity. The site is using street parking to meet its parking requirements, and individuals parking along the streets don't have a direct pathway to the sidewalk or into the site. Instead, they would have to walk through the swales or go around walking on the street. So those are the primary concerns. As I noted, we are still getting the street trees. So they are proposing putting the trees within the back slope of the swale right next to the sidewalk. So we still get some shade, some softening of the pedestrian environment. During initial discussions, we did bring in community forestry. They review the final placement of street trees within the right-of-way in addition to ACHD. Community forestry said that this location is appropriate for the trees and that the proposed root barrier will allow them to grow healthy. So we are still going to get street trees, and there are no concerns that there will be issues with their growth. So to address the safety and just design concerns, connectivity of City Council, the committee did receive a memo suggesting an added condition, which is to redesign the street swales to accommodate pedestrian connectivity between the sidewalk and parking spaces along both Limelight and Row, and provide an improved pedestrian environment that may include but is not limited to reducing slopes, utilizing permeable pavers to reduce swale demand, and an increased landscape buffer. The final design should be coordinated with design review staff and ACHD. So this condition is worded to allow us to still review the project, look at some details. They do have a geotech report that should have been attached to the report to kind of see what would be the best option. The applicant has worked on a redesign of the swales based off of City Council direction. By the time they completed redesigning a proposal, it wasn't quite enough time for us to submit it into the record, but I believe they will present the options in their presentation today. So we will have a proposed change that we can discuss and see what is appropriate. Overall, staff is recommending approval for the construction of multifamily units proposed under DRH 20-0069 with the attached conditions of approval. With that, we can see the new swale designs proposed by the applicant and hear from the public. And I'd just like to leave us with the photos of the surrounding area for context.
Thanks, Casey. Any questions for staff at this point in time? Hearing none. Is the applicant present? Great. And would you like to present at this time?
Yes, good evening, Chair and committee members. This is Scott McCormick. I'm the managing development partner for this project, which we call Limelight Village. And my address is 5321 West Hidden Springs Drive, Boise 83714. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Can I share the screen at this time, Casey?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, what do I need to do here? Share screen. Okay, let me know when you can see that.
You can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you for the opportunity to present the project and discuss the issues that are outstanding. I just want to say I think the staff's done a great job in just working with us and going back and forth and just trying to be cooperative. I also want to let you know that we have two other team members that are on the meeting tonight, which is our lead designer, Walter Hughes from Humphreys and Partners Architects. And we also have Dan Erlinson from HPLA Studio, our landscape architect. So if there's any questions that may come up for them. So the first thing I just want to say is that these are you can see the first rendering. Oh, sorry, this is the first rendering along Rose Street showing our building pipe 1. This is our building pipe 2. And it seems like the staff is satisfied with that. We feel really proud of it. We think they're very attractive and present kind of a nice Mountain West look. With respect to the landscape plan, Casey did a nice job showing us the details along the swales. I'm going to kind of focus on the swale discussion at this point because we previously worked with them on dealing with internal pathways, landscape, and refining exterior design. We've kind of worked through all that with them. And in this case, we heard the goals of the council and we saw the revised staff recommendations. And based on that, we've worked with our team and we've come up with some new design plans that we think address this and exceed what's been requested. So this is just a quick summary of what we've done since the council meeting on July 28th. So along Rose Street, in order to address the key issues that were brought up, which were improve pedestrian safety and connectivity and reduce the slopes, here's what we've done. I'll summarize these real quickly and I'll just show you on the plan how it works. But we've added 2-foot level landings at the sidewalk and the curb. So that helps anybody who's walking on the sidewalk and the curb be able to get out of their car safely. We've reduced the depth of the swale, this on Rose Street, first of all. We've reduced the depth of the swale from 12 inches to 6 inches. We've reduced the slope from 3.1 to 4.1. And we're gonna add 2 strategically placed 5-foot concrete connectivity paths from the curb to the sidewalk on Row. And we'll show you where we have the tentative locations for those. We can work with staff on the ultimate locations. We also have added shrubs and native seed mix to give the planters a more natural and attractive look and feel. Then on Limelight Street, we added a 3-foot level landing at the sidewalk and a 2-foot level landing at the curb. We reduced the depth of that swale from 12 inches to 9 inches, and we reduced the slope from 3.1 to 4.1. And we'll add 2 logically placed 5-foot concrete connectivity paths from the curb to the sidewalk on Limelight. I think the other thing I would just add is that Casey was mentioning that we worked with staff and the city arborist, and through that process, we actually did agree to an additional 5-foot buffer on Limelight Street to give a little bit more room for the trees, and that was a good process that we worked through. This is a section of the Rose Street, which just shows you, and I'll use my cursor here. Here's the 2-foot landings. We've reduced the slope. We've also changed the bottom of the swale from a sand drainage swale to, we're going to use this bioretention swale where we use some amended soil that helps the drainage and gives it just a better look. And then above here is the plant selection from our landscape architect that we're going to use in here, including the trees that we plan to put along there as required by the code. This is Limelight Street. It shows you the sidewalk here. We have the 3-foot planter and the 3-foot landing area next to the sidewalk. And then we have the 2-foot level entryway off the curb there. And same thing, similar kind of landscape selection. And then these are the trees that will go along Limelight Street. This is a site plan showing you where we intended to put the connectivity pathways. So we looked at kind of the distance between the entrance here on Rose Street and the corner. And then we decided that these would be really strategic places to put these. So that if somebody were getting out of a vehicle, they wanted to walk along the new level pathway, get here and cross over, it would be easy for them to do so and safely. And we did the same thing along Limelight Street. We picked what we thought was logical and reasonable locations along these areas along the street buffers. Also to the right here, we show you, this is the ACHD best management practices detail. We use this as inspiration for trying to accomplish the goals that were set forth and the concerns by council. And we think that we've done that to a great extent and that we've exceeded it. So sort of in summary of what we're presenting here is that there's a couple of just key points I wanted to reiterate to the committee. And number one is that swales are allowed with alternative compliance requests, which we have made through the design review process appropriately. The Boise City Code sets forth specific design and engineering requirements for swales to be approved through this alternative compliance process. These drainage swales are necessary in this case, and it's due to the high water table in the property. As Casey said, we have provided the geotech report for the record, which I think you guys have available. And it shows that the average water table here is about 4 to 6 feet. And the surrounding high density properties in this area also have used swales for solutions in their case. We also would like to just state for the record that our design meets and exceeds each of the code's requirements. In addition to the standard city code requirements, the city approved this project with the condition that we revise the design, minimize the slope, increase safety and connection, and we think we've done a good job of that. I'd also like to mention that this swale has been approved by HCHD, the original design, and of course, this second design, as Casey stated, will be submitted to them for them to approve the new revised design. So in summary, we've addressed all the goals and design requirements. We feel we've met and exceeded the goals and concerns that were mentioned by council and planning staff. And we are requesting that you approve this item as staff has recommended, and we agree to the staff conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Any questions for the applicant from the committee at this point?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have two questions of Mr. McCormick. One, will the cross access from the curb to the sidewalk, I assume that would be handicap accessible for somebody in a wheelchair?
We hadn't discussed that specifically, but I am confident that the 5-foot width of those concrete paths would be connected into the sidewalk and would meet that requirement.
Okay. Second question, under a storm event, do your calculations indicate that that there will be a absorption rate such that at some point during that event, you will probably have standing water in there until the retention basin assimilates the water?
Yes, that is correct. The civil engineer, in a rain event, there would be a time where there'd be standing water in there until it drains through.
Do you have a time on that? Is it an hour, 2 hours?
I do not have that, and unfortunately, our civil engineer is currently traveling and not available tonight. But my discussions with her was that it meets all of the code requirements, and she has done the calculations in accordance with city and HCHD standards.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the committee for Mr. McCormick? Seeing none, thank you very much. And is there anyone representing the neighborhood association here tonight that's wishing to speak? Looks like we do. Erica?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. If you would please state your name and address for the record.
I do have a slideshow, so should I get that set up first?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so walk me through this. I have it open.
I believe you should be able to just share your screen.
Okay.
Erica, you'll be promoted to a panelist, so just one moment.
Yes. Share screen. I'm looking for it, just a moment.
There it is.
Okay. Erica Schofield, 7363 West Limelight Court, Boise, Idaho, 83714. I am a member of the Northwest Neighborhood Association. I'm a board member, and I'll be representing the neighborhood's concerns tonight, just as I did when we appealed this development application after planning and zoning. My focus for the last 2.5 years as a board member has been on public health and safety in relation to land use law and development for my neighborhood. This is the 16th time I've provided testimony on behalf of infrastructure and safety hazards. Yes, you heard that right. That's the 16th time in 2.5 years. I have not provided testimony on traffic and all kinds of things that most people provide testimony. I've focused on citizen safety. And you recently heard me testify on school buses picking up children on Highway 45 or Highway 44 at 50 to 55 miles per hour. That was about a month ago. So just as with that development, I want to say the same thing to start out with this application. and make something clear. We're not in opposition to the actual building and the design materials and the lay of the land in terms of how the structures are sited and such. We simply are in opposition to a condition that we believe will make a hazardous situation versus actually work to promote and protect public safety. So this is what we're looking at tonight when we have drainage swales allowed in our neighborhood. This is just to the east of this property. This is actually a swale that was allowed to be mitigated to have reduced slope. And if you look at those photos, all it does is flood into the street. So it doesn't necessarily help the matter at all to have less slope than the 12 inches because it just makes it flood into the road, which causes additional hazards. You know, I put the statement at the top here of never underestimate the power of water because it's so true. This was just a storm day in June. Nothing unusual about it. And this is what happens in the drainage swales. They inundate the roadway and they also produce situations where a child or a toddler can drown. They can drown in 2 to 3 inches of water. So we're faced with a situation where in this particular application, there was no ACHD hearing for the public to address this issue because there wasn't a traffic study required to be held in a hearing. The record shows that ACHD did not have a modification or waiver for their own policy regarding the swale to be modified and waived. The Boise Stormwater Management Ordinance requires an actual more official drainage plan to be submitted to the building department. We've got Boise Ordinance 4619 that gives you guys design review authority over on-site grading and drainage, while ACHD's policies give them authority over the public right-of-way, which is Rose Street. Furthermore, we had Planning and Zoning Council and now Design Review placing conditions on stormwater management in the public right-of-way, yet we have a groundwater study that was done on October 21st, but not submitted until here recently. No soil permeability test was conducted in that study. So in terms of being able to definitively say how fast that water would be absorbed isn't necessarily possible without an actual test. So the full requirements of analysis, when I read ACHD policy and the Boise stormwater policies, they have not been fully conducted. I believe that takes place once Public Works and the building code take this on. So setting forth conditions or limitations is premature without this required data. And I did actually submit a question to Josh, which he did reply to me. I said, find it kind of contradictory to Idaho Code 6765352 that says a decision has to have a rationale that's based on factual information contained in the record, yet we don't have any final findings approved from City Council because they're on vacation and they're not going to approve their findings until August 18th. So we have a whole lot of issues just on the procedural side. Furthermore, according to Boise Code, words do matter when you're dealing with the law. And it says that alternative compliance is to be submitted as a request in conjunction with the application. And the applications for the conditional use permit and design review were submitted in January and February. Whereas on July 21st, the applicant submitted a letter that states that this is in connection with this application. And I know this is probably a minor point to many, but words do matter when you're dealing with the law. So for ACHD, this is from their stormwater management policies. They allow infiltration swales on arterials, collectors, medians, and subdivision common lots and rural streets with lot sizes of 1 acre or greater, but less than 5 acres per dwelling, not total size for the entire unit. ACHD does not allow swales on residential streets. You can see where I've marked the 2 red boxes on their BMP 30 here. The top one addresses not residential streets and the rural issue. The second box addresses the step out zones that Scott was talking about earlier. And if you note there, it does say has to meet current ADA requirements. So that will be part of that condition if this moves forward. Furthermore, in ACHD, in terms of addressing what they mean by rural, so Rose Street is a local street, and they define local as urban and rural. This is not a rural location. If you look at their table 8, for rural streets do not require sidewalks. Boise annexed this area, which at one time was rural, and that's why the Silver Cloud Apartments have a drainage swale, because it was built during the time when it was still in Ada County, not under Boise code. It's no longer rural. It is going to be rezoned to higher density multifamily residential. So designing for public safety, that prior slide when it said a 24-inch step out zone, this is an example in ACHD's stormwater design section 8200 that shows what that would look like. It does not show swooping low mitigated swales that are open where water still collects. It's actually more like instead of a raised bed, it's more like a sunken edged bed with the pathways to cross through in appropriate sections. So infiltration swales, the record for this application shows the ACHD staff member saying that these are unusual, that they allow them. And why is that so? In their second email here, they said we don't allow them because they're frequently altered without proper approval, which is exactly what has happened in our neighborhood. Here is the Silver Cloud townhouses. So the apartments were developed when it was Ada County and allowed to have this swale. The townhouses were developed once it moved into Annex Boise, and the developer disregarded their permit and installed these otherwise, which was not what was allowed. And Boise at this point has done nothing about it, which I plan to follow up on, because it's essentially a violation of what they were approved for their land use development. They went ahead and not only installed swales, but they planted the trees right in the middle of them, which is, if you know anything about landscaping and plants, not the best environment for a plant to survive. And I'm going to add this additional fact here because I think decisions should always be considered with the long-term impacts in mind. The city of Boise took on and hired a consulting company to do a climate adaptation study in 2016. And of the 8 significant impacts in the next 60 years, the second one was heavy precipitation days, specifically saying that flood-related hazards to property, roadways, and water contamination can and will occur, and that it can exceed the capacity of the stormwater system. So here's what these swales around this area look like right now when it's dry outside. People tend to park away from the curb. Granted, keep in mind that my slides were made before Scott just showed his slides with the adaptation that ACHD would require. But right now, people park away from the curb because they want to be able to get out of their car onto flat land, not stepping right into an angled swale. They don't want to trudge through stormwater, so that forces people to walk through the street to reach the corner. I will have to say that the addition of shrubs and grass to the swale that Scott is proposing will be a nightmare for the landscape people to maintain. You've got angles, kind of cut grass with shrubs in the way, and the shrubs that he has listed generally grow from anywhere from 6 to 8 wide and up to 12 feet tall. They are far too large for this kind of an application. And I am a master gardener with the University of Idaho, so I feel like I have some ability to say that with confidence. This also creates quite a bit of issues for ADA access. The city of Boise just proclaimed ADA Awareness Day, and without addressing this, we end up creating additional mobility challenges for individuals in wheelchairs, walkers, or even if you have crutches. You can't use a side lift or a car ramp. A service animal is trained to not expose their person to a water hazard. And again, it would force people to walk in the unprotected street without actual pathway access. But my biggest concern here is this. A toddler can drown in 2 to 3 inches of water. There's an absolute sound reason why this is allowed in an industrial area or a rural area with low density or a farm. It's not meant for high density where children are going to be. I put this in the packet that I sent you. I put it in the city council and the planning and zoning's packet. it clearly, these are various different sites throughout the country that deal with child safety. And when it says small bodies of standing water around your home, such as drainage ditches, are part of this risk, that needs to be taken extremely seriously. Children are attracted to water. It sparkles, it moves, it's associated with fun. This particular project doesn't have any kid-friendly amenities due to the target market that they're seeking. And it's important to recognize that the court, it shows in the record that they will examine if the situation was considered an attractive nuisance for children. There's a logical and sound reason why these should not be allowed. It leads to negligence, in my opinion. It can be mitigated by simply following the law and saying we're not going to make an exception to this because it enables a hazard to public health and safety. It can possibly lead to personal injury lawsuits, and case law has shown that you can be liable in a wrongful death situation or a lawsuit when water is involved. If you look at other areas throughout the city that have been recently developed, especially near the East End, no open stormwater retention systems are located along the street. None. I drove all around looking and I couldn't find a single one. So for the Boise Development Code, in terms of meeting the purpose and intent, it does not achieve a safe environment. It does not meet the required findings for alternative compliance. The site conditions have not been proven to be impossible or impractical. It's not equal or superior to what is required. It's actually detrimental to public welfare due to being an attractive nuisance for children, leading to a possible high risk of drowning. Protecting the health and safety and general welfare is the #1 priority, in addition to protecting the waters of the state. I ask that you look at this criteria very carefully, because minimizing the slope from 12 inches to 6 inches or 12 inches to 9 inches is not going to mitigate the risk of a toddler drowning in 2 to 3 inches of water. And furthermore, at this point in time, this lacks clear and convincing evidence that the facts and circumstances warrant a finding of an exception. The additional geotechnical work needs to be done before conditions can be placed in the record that say this is allowed or this isn't allowed. We're jumping ahead of the game here. Let me just look at my last few notes to make sure I've covered everything. Oh, and in closing, here's what I want to say in terms of making exceptions. On August 25th, 2003, the city of Boise made an exception to a critical safety standard for the annexation of the Oregon Trail subdivision. The record shows the land was located partially outside of the required fire response standard. A planning and zoning commissioner specifically asked about that risk in the public hearing, and exactly 5 years to the very day, a horrific tragedy occurred. On August 25, 2008, 10 homes were destroyed, 11 damaged, 100 people evacuated, 18 first responders were injured, and a BSU professor lost her life and her spouse lost his partner. Why? Because we made an exception to safety. That's not why we have laws in place. Laws are in place to protect citizen safety. They're not in place to make exceptions to them. I ask that you please consider this very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schofield. Josh, was there anybody else on the sign-up sheet or anything at this point before I open up to the public for testimony?
Mr. Chairman, I believe we did have one more member on the sign-up sheet, so you could ask the attendees if anyone else would like to speak.
Okay. Yeah, at this point, if anyone else wants to testify tonight on this particular topic, if you would please virtually raise your hand. Not seeing any other hands being raised. Assuming there's nobody in person there with you, Josh. And with that, we would turn it back over to the applicant for rebuttal. Mr. McCormick, if you'd like to say a few last words.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I I think what I'd like to just reiterate to the committee is that one, this project has been approved by the commission. It's been approved by the council with the conditions as they set forth. We've agreed to those. We believe that we have met those and exceeded them. The current code allows for this alternative compliance. And I think the other part with respect to the ADA comments made by Erica, I would just say we have and meet the appropriate ADA standards for parking within the project. So any of those folks would be able to park inside. Our civil engineer has worked in the area, and the geotech report has also been completed by MTI, who has extensive knowledge of the area. They have indicated what the soil type is there. So our civil engineer has done the calculations and said that this meets those standards and understands generally what the percolation is in the area. In addition, as I pointed out earlier, we are going to use the standards from ACHD, which uses an uncompacted bioretention soil, which will help the drainage in these areas. And we will meet all conditions required with this respect. Staff recommends approval, as they've stated previously. We've been delayed significantly through this process due to COVID-19 and a bunch of other things, but it's been a very long process for us. I would just request that you allow this, that you would just go with the staff's recommendation, allow them to do their job and work with us to make sure we meet all the requirements as have been stated. We have tried to be very cooperative and expended additional resources in order to meet these requirements. And we feel like we've met and exceed those, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Any other questions for the applicant from the committee at this point in time? Yes, Ms. Aguilar.
This is for the applicant and staff. I guess I don't see in our packet a grading and drainage plan, and we're being asked to make a decision about grading and drainage. Where is that plan? And was that included with the P&Z application?
Committee Member Aguilar, I'll go for that one. So typically we see the drainage and grading plan through the building permit. That's because the building permit gets routed to Public Works, and they're the entity who specifically reviews drainage. So they'll review to make sure that the swale retention is appropriate, that it won't go outside of the allowed area for the swale retention. Sometimes applicants will submit grading through design review application, but it's not required. It's not on our checklist. So what we review is the requirements for swales within the code, and then Public Works, ACHD, if we want to go beyond, City of Boise, have their own specific requirements that get reviewed in addition to what we're reviewing.
And I would just add, Casey, isn't it fairly rare that an applicant would turn in that drainage plan at this point in the process?
Typically they get submitted with the building permit, so that would occur after design review.
Right.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I will close the public portion of this test or of this item and bring back to the committee for discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Talboy.
If I may, just a couple of points. I do compliment the design. I think that I think it's very attractive, very well done. I have to admit, though, I've had some of the same concerns that Ms. Schofield raised about the berms and the swales and the standing water for a number of reasons. Obviously, child safety is huge. I also understand that, the drainage requirements and those types of things, excuse me, but if I understand things correctly, and some insight into this would be very helpful for me, is whether we have any if we can change or make recommendations relative to those, to the drainage that's already there. It'd be really nice to know if we had that geotech report to know what that, or what the percolation rate was, to see, I don't know if we could compare that to what we saw in the photographs, but obviously the quicker you can get it out of there, the better. But I don't know that, and anybody that can direct me, I would appreciate it, if we can make recommendations for that, or if that's some other part of the process.
Yeah, I don't know, Casey or Josh, you would want to chime in on that. But typically, Talbot, from my own personal experience on applications with ACHD and drainage in the right of way, as well as on-site drainage as it correlates to ACHD, it's a very carefully monitored piece where I know ACHD does not like to take any drainage from on-site onto their portions.
Right.
They're very, very particular about the drainage of their own. You know, what are the other options, I guess, would be what you probably see in some of those other subdivisions, or some underground seepage bed, or some other kind of storm structures that are in those systems. But in this case, you know, the applicant will also be making additional applications to ACHD, who will review the geotechnical reports, to the percolation rates, the size of the retention basins, safety, and everything on that regard inside of the right-of-way as part of their application. And I don't believe we have a whole lot of jurisdiction. I don't know that it, if there was something that you wanted to recommend that gets passed along to ACHD, that's something I'm sure we could ask staff to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That actually clarifies that. I mean, I think that the point of my comments were, I figured it was down the road and there were more cross checks, etc. And I just really, I do understand the concerns. I want to let Ms. Schofield know that I mean, that rings a bell, and I think that is an issue that needs to make sure that it's done in the, however it's done, in the safest manner possible. You know, and like I said, I didn't think that we really had a whole lot. I don't even know what I would recommend, quite honestly, other than an underground seepage bed, but I don't know that that's within our purview to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ACHD will make those recommendations, I think, on all of that side from the stormwater retention. You know, it's a little bit challenging even with the ADA portions of things. I mean, the other examples that they show have detached sidewalks as well, but they're also in uneven ground with grass and such, and it's probably still not exactly an ADA surface that you get out of your car and walk on, you know, in those circumstances. There's also a 6-inch curb at all those locations, so it's not a wheelchair ADA accessible locations on any of those as well, which would be considered on the inside of the parking where they meet the minimum required accessible parking stalls. So it's a little bit hard to tell where you actually draw the line. Aesthetically, I prefer having detached sidewalks. I think they look better. Swales, I understand the safety concerns. They do work fairly well, and they are a good solution in high groundwater areas, and it's a pretty common solution. However, in these locations, it's yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we have a whole lot of purview to make much of other than potentially a recommendation to pass along to ACHD.
You froze up there, but what I did hear was a very good clarification. Thank you very much.
Other concerns or anything on this application? I would probably reiterate what Mr. Cowboy said. I think it's a very attractive design, well thought out. And short of the items that are in ACHD's right of way, I didn't hear much of anything that is of concern from design or aesthetics? And if not, if there's other discussion, I'd be certainly open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mrs. Ball.
I'll jump into this. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done by both the neighborhood as well as the applicant to try to make this a very attractive and safe project. I don't know that there's given the high water table and that fact this is in the right of way, that there's much one can do other than to continue to work on the swale design and with the various agencies and reviewing staff and the design team to make it the best they can under the situation. With that, I would propose that we approve DRH 20-0069 with the waiver request as recommended in the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommended conditions of approval as noted in the report, with the addition of condition 1I to state that the redesign of the street swales consistent with the concept in the revised documents provided by the applicant at the August 12th meeting to accommodate pedestrian connectivity between the sidewalk and parking spaces along both Limelight and Row, and provide an improved pedestrian environment that may include but is not limited to reducing the slopes and an increased landscape buffer. The final design will be coordinated with and approved by the design staff and ACHD.
Yeah, I'd second that, Mr. Chairman.
Hearing none, Victoria, will you call the roll?
Zabala,
Aye.
Rudine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Hellboy.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next item to be heard is item number 6, DRH 20-00298. Location is 5452 West State Street. And at this point, I'll turn it over to staff for their report.
Okay, just let me share my screen real quick. Please let me know if you can see the screen.
We can.
Perfect. So again, we are reviewing item number DRH 20-00298. This is the proposed site plan for the project. They are proposing a light industrial warehouse building with some office space. As you can see, there is a future development parcel shown on the site plan. That property will require a separate review through design review and is not subject to the current review. The current configuration of the lot with the warehouse building A and then the T3 sport building above appears to have occurred in 2015. We could not find records with the city with this site configuration. Instead, what we have is this record of survey, which shows 3 lots instead of 2, configured the opposite way. Because of that, the lot is technically not a buildable lot at this moment. However, because of that, the first condition is to pursue a record of survey to do a lot line adjustment and consolidation. The applicant is in the process of doing this, so that's why we're reviewing the design review. They will need to comply with any requirements of the record of survey, and if there's any significant changes to the proposed layout because of the record of survey, we would go through a modification application through design review. I've mostly laid out some of the conditions, unsure of the concerns of the public, and we can go back to them, but primarily with the site layout, There's some parking changes, some cross-access agreements needed, as well as some pathway reconfiguration. This is the landscape plan. The main requirements are we need a few more street trees. Additionally, we need verification from Idaho Power that they would allow Class 2 trees. There are some overhead lines, and we are anticipating needing to replace those with appropriate Class 1 trees. We do need some terminal planters, do need a finalized tree mitigation plan, and we need to relocate some light poles. With the design conditions, primarily this is because this is an industrial building. It's designed and used for industrial building, but it is in a commercial zone. So because of that, it is not exempt for our design standards. So we do need to get some decorative building materials on the front facade, get some more design interest. We also need to avoid blank walls on the side elevations. So with the applicant agreeing with the recommended conditions of approval, just like to reiterate that staff does recommend approval of this project, and I'm happy to answer questions that may arise.
Thanks, Casey. Questions for the for staff from the committee? Seeing none, we will now turn it over to the applicant or hear from the applicant. Is the applicant present? Mr. Barton?
I am.
Yes. If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Brett Bartron. Would the office address work? Sorry, 725 East 2nd Street in Meridian, Idaho, 83642.
Great, thanks.
So we did agree with all the conditions laid out by the staff, and there was no other concern brought by the public. I did speak with one property owner across the road. So I guess at this point, I would just love to hear the concerns brought by the public.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Is there anybody from the neighborhood association actually here tonight? If you would please virtually raise your hand. Seeing none, we would open it up to the public for testimony. I believe we do have one that there shows up as Galaxy S9 on my sheet or thing. If you would please state state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mark Salvi. My address is across the street at 5501 West State Street, Boise, Idaho, 83703. I'm the president of an organization called Pick Apart Jalopy Jungle. We're a network of automobile salvage yards. I just wanted to be on this call to be on record. I am not against the proposed project. Being a grandfathered business model in the area, we're heavy industrial in operation. I wanted to make sure and confirm that there was going to be no alteration to the traffic flow on State Street. We have semis and tow trucks frequently come in, and we need a full access on our most eastern property border there. And I want to be sure that none of that's going to be hindered with this current development and then that future corner development coming up. So I wanted to be on record that we do have a grandfathered business there that's been 60 plus years operating, that I want to be sure we're able to maintain that operation unhindered with this development. That's really it. I'd like to hear from the applicant. I don't know if ACHD has commented on it, put any, proposed write-in, write-outs or anything like that. Those types of things severely hinder our business. So that's what I'm here to try and figure out.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify in opposition or to just to testify in general to this item tonight? If you would, please virtually raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll turn it back over to the applicants. If you'd like to clarify some items.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. So there is actually a study done by ACHD, and actually I spoke to Ed. He said he was actually the owner of Jalopy Jungles there. I talked to him this afternoon, and I told him that there is actually a study done by ACHD, and they are looking at changing the traffic flow along State Street. However, that has nothing to do with this development. That study is actually completed months ago, I believe, if not at least a year. And these revisions have been, coming down the pipeline long before we even looked at this property. So I would advise him to look into that. I don't have that exact report number or or reference, but Casey, do you have that information that maybe you could share with him?
Hi, so ACHD did provide comments. They did not specifically change traffic flow with this project. They did take some future dedicated right-of-way, which is in anticipation of development of State Street, which will include multiple lanes, bike lanes, and a potential multi-use pathway. I do not have the specifics of when that project will occur. It is not being prompted by this project, and it's not occurring now or because of the project.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further or any questions from the committee for the applicant? All right. Hearing none, we'll close the public portion of this here and bring it back to the committee for discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chairman. Feels to me like everybody's on the right wavelength here. I haven't heard any objections, so I'm just going to make a motion that we approve DRH 20-00298 based on the associated findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of conditions of approval noted in the project report.
Thank you, Mr. Redeem.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cowboy, for the second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Victoria, will you please call the roll?
Zabala,
Aye.
Rudine,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Talboy.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And Victoria, I don't believe that at the beginning I actually got a approval on our minutes. Did I from July 8th?
Mr. Chairman, no, you did not. If you could do that, that would be great.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd look for a motion for approval of the July 8th, 2020 minutes.
I would move for approval of the minutes of July 8th, 2020 as written.
Thank you. So moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Cowboy. Any discussion on the minutes from July 8th? None. Victoria, please call the roll.
Zabala,
Aye.
Rudine,
I'll abstain because I wasn't present.
Marsh,
Aye.
Aguilar,
Aye.
Talboy.
Aye.
Motion carries, 4 in favor, 1 abstained.
And I believe that concludes all of our items for tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Casey, are you still there?
Yes.
Hey, I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate your presentations. I like how you do that and all the information you provide us.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Nice to see Tom in the building.
See you next month.
Monday evening.